Former Vice President Mike Pence is throwing himself back into the political spotlight.
Mr. Pence will deliver a speech today at the Heritage Foundation, a prominent conservative think tank. He's expected to lay out his so-called freedom agenda and how Republicans should hit back at the policies of the Biden administration. Let's bring in Doug Heye. He is a former communications director for the Republican National Committee. Also joining us is Fin Gomez. He is CBS News political director. Doug, I want to start with you. For people who don't know, how influential is the Heritage Foundation in Republican politics, and what does the former vice president have to gain from speaking there?
So it's enormously influential, and it's changed over the years. When I first came to Capitol Hill, and I'm going to say the 1970s, maybe not that early, it was really a policy organization where Republicans in Congress, members and staff would go to for help on issues from foreign policy to healthcare to taxes and so forth. You'd go to the Heritage on policy. They were the policy experts on sort of everything under the sun. What we've seen over the past 10 years is that it's really moved into more of a political organization. It still definitely has the policy chops, but it's more political than it is now. And so Mike Pence speaking to this organization suggests not only speaks to the seriousness of the Heritage Foundation, but suggests that he's serious about moving forward in some capacity in 2022 and certainly 2024.
And so, Finn, to dive into that a little bit more, the former vice president has, of course, been the focus of some of the January 6th hearings.
Right.
How difficult will it be for him to lead the party forward when some Republican voters who support former President Trump still believe he should not have certified the election results? And how has he been responding to the January 6th committee in real time?
Well, first of all, I think Doug Heye was there in the 1970s, but I would add that Mike Pence does have a difficult path, a very narrow one, before that is even a reality. And like you said, I think there's some in Trump's MAGA base, like even former senior White House aide Peter Navarro, who has gone as far to say that Pence committed treason on January 6, 2021. He's got a lot of obstacles in front of him that will prove to be difficult. But he also has, he's had increased support from the traditional Republican conservatives. And don't forget that he has ties to the evangelical vote. That's part of the reason that Trump put him on the ticket. And some of this January 6th coverage is, in fact, according to people close to Pence, has made him seem more presidential, in fact, being there, staying on the Capitol grounds, asking for reinforcements at the Capitol. It's actually worked in his favor. Listen, Trump still has a very significant hold on this party. Even in the last New York Times Siena poll, it showed that he had about 49% compared to DeSantis at 25 and Pence in fourth place in that poll.
Doug, former President Trump is scheduled to speak in Washington tomorrow as he considers another bid for the White House. Given the stats Finn just mentioned, is Mr. Trump still a strong enough force in that party that other potential candidates like Mike Pence would choose not to run if it meant taking him on?
But he's still the alpha dog in the party. He may be a smaller alpha dog than he was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever it may be, but he's still the main dog. And, what we see with Trump is when he endorses a candidate, it guarantees them a third of the vote, essentially. It doesn't guarantee they're going to win their primary, but it's a big part of the base that shows up. And ultimately, that's what Republican members of Congress, that's what candidates are very fearful of, is losing that third, because it's a very active and loud part of the base that shows up for every election. And that's why, as we see candidates trying to jockey themselves for 2024, should Trump not run, one, they want to get those voters, but two, they also want to make sure that those voters, aren't necessarily opposed to them from day one.
Right. So, Finn, keeping in mind that third, right, that sort of solid third of the voter base there, if former Vice President Pence does intend to run in 2024, who do you think he should be more worried about, former President Trump or rising stars like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis?
I think he has to be cognizant of both, like that narrow path that we were talking about before. Even though he's getting a lot of recent attention for a potential White House bid, he has that very narrow, thin path, and he has to be cognizant of both sides. DeSantis is growing. He's got a ton of money, and his former boss is someone, again, who has a significant hold still within the Republican Party. But he is looking to distance himself as he looks in ways of potential bid. You saw it in Arizona over the past weekend, where where he campaigned for his gubernatorial candidate versus Trump's pick in Karen Taylor Robson versus Carrie Lake. And you saw that. You saw these burgeoning rivalry between Pence and Trump that could be a narrative that could continue through next year and into 2024. So some of the things that people close to tell me people close to Pence tell me is that Pence embodies many of the Trumpian policies that are popular without the baggage, the political baggage that Trump may carry. But still, recent polls, as I said, show that Pence has a lot of work to do.
All right, Doug Heye, whose institutional knowledge we now know extends back to the 1970s. Thank you so much. At least.
I've known Doug for a long time.
That's right. And Finn Gomez, thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.